Live from Rivendell, this is Derailed Train the Fleet. So hello, Tim.
Hey, Nick.
This has been, okay, we don't normally have good places to podcast, but this is pretty awesome.
This is the best place we've been to since Care Paravel.
I know, we're hanging out, we're singing songs, lots of songs.
Yes, lots of
Lots of food.
Oh, awesome food.
Lots of stories that are sung. I mean,
they pretty much sing all the time around
yeah,
here.
I know.
And it'd get a little monotonous if it wasn't a new song like every minute.
Yeah, and yeah, they're pretty awesome.
They're pretty, yeah.
Yeah.
So
very fair and
thankfully we actually came to Rivendell prepared this time.
Yeah, we wanted to bring our interviewee with us, but we're going to get 2 tickets to Rivendell.
That's true.
So yeah, we should go ahead and just introduce our story school. All right, so this is a pre-recorded interview we had with Dr. Pamela Jordan-Long, my English professor when I was at Taylor, and she's in charge of the writing major at Fort Wayne.
Yeah. So
and enjoy. It's a very good interview. We'd like to welcome Dr. Pamela Jordan-Long, chair of the professional writing major at Taylor University Upland, and also director of the Center for Study of C.S. Lewis and Friends. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
it's our pleasure. This is the first time we have like a genuine celebrity on the show. Yeah. I feel like
a celebrity.
And Dr. Jordan was my teacher in several classes when I was in school at Taylor Fort Wayne. Did you never had her, did you, Tim?
No, I was not in professional writing at the time. Although I did accidentally ask her out on a date once.
Well, I don't know anything about that.
Well, that's another story.
Yeah.
So we brought Dr. Jordan in today because we're talking about world building, secondary worlds, and she's been teaching the fantasy writing class there at Taylor that, if you've been listening to podcasts, I've mentioned that I've been helping out, looking over the stories. So I guess I want to ask you first, just the term secondary world, that's what you use, correct?
Yes.
But I was talking to Tim about it. He had never quite used that, heard that term, so maybe you can explain it for our audience.
Well, sure. I think my inspiration comes from C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien because they use that language. And the idea in any speculative fiction is that there is another reality or another world. And when someone wants to write a piece of fantasy or a speculative fiction, she needs to create a secondary world, something other than the primary world, which is the world that we're living in and existing in. The foundational premise of fantasy is that it's possible in this other world, and it's believable and credible in this other world, hence a secondary world.
Now, also, and I was thinking, maybe I'm incorrect, does the secondary world also tend to imply for Lewis and Tolkien the fact that truth is inherent in our primary one?
Well, I don't know that they would argue that that's a necessity for a secondary world. It certainly is in the secondary worlds that they create.
Okay.
In their fiction. But to get back to the other point, yes, they do believe that truth is foundational in the primary world, that truth exists. There is truth with a capital T. And they believe that that truth can be projected and presented viably in a secondary world.
Okay. When you're teaching the fantasy writing class, I know you go through. Do you still use Orson Scott's Cards book?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What's the title of that, just for our reader?
Well, the whole title it's pretty simple: How to Write Science Fiction and Fantasy.
Nice. You go through a lot of different aspects of world building and secondary worlds. I guess I'm curious, what parts of that have you found that people are really attracted to or really maybe hesitant about in creating in a secondary world? Have you noticed any trends?
Well, there's no wrong or right way to do it. if you're talking about C.S. Lewis, it was a picture in his mind. He even has an essay titled "It All Began with a Picture."
Mm-hmm.
And then he just kind of goes, well, where would this picture exist? What kind of world would it be in? He starts with an image and moves from there. Orson Scott Card tends to draw sketches and maps and think, what could take place in this thing I've just created? So it tends to be visual. For Tolkien, it really seriously was some doodling on a student's paper. And it just was a word, a phrase. A hobbit lived in a hole. And from that, you get a whole world. So it doesn't happen the same for every writer, but it's my argument and what I rather insist that my students do is that you have to create the world before you can write the story. You may have story ideas, but if you're really going to move through creating a viable story, you have to know this world that it takes place in. So you become a sub-creator, as in the language of Tolkien. And so you get to create this secondary world, this other world, its rules, its landscape, its people, its history, its culture, its religion, all of the story. And then when you know that world really well, then you can tell your story. You can create a plot and events that happen in it.
I'm curious, since I know a lot of the students that come to Taylor for writing are probably highly influenced by Lewis and Tolkien. Do you ever have any of your students kind of struggling to get past kind of the great, Narnia and Middle Earth, since these are these great things? Do they ever have a trouble getting past what's already been done? Or do they generally have lots of ideas that they can't get them all down on paper?
Actually, they don't tend to have too much trouble coming up with ideas, and most are pretty familiar with Tolkien and Lewis, but I actually have some who have never read either or anything by either.
Wow.
And I actually had one in class this past semester who hadn't seen any of the movies either.
Really?
So that does happen. But we actually start this particular class with a lot of what-if questions, and some of them are pretty outlandish. And we just kind of off the cuff walk into the room at the beginning of class and just ask a what-if question, which is really the way most fantasy and speculative fiction gets written. Well, what if? What if there was a creature called a hobbit who lived in a hole? What would that be like? And what kind of world would she live in? And what would the history be? What if there was a history for other planets as there is a history for Earth? What if God created life on Venus and there was such a thing as an unfallen planet? Then you get Lewis's science fiction trilogy. What if I walked into the classroom today and one of my students was suddenly invisible? What if aliens came to Earth and they took over our bodies? So you just start with a what if question and go from there.
Nick's laughing here because you've touched on, a couple things that we've talked about. Well, what if is actually the name of a segment we sometimes do, although the questions we pose are not actually all as useful as probably the ones you just did. Mm-hmm. But it's just fun to talk about. Like the first one we did was, what if Tolkien wrote Star Wars? And that was just, so we had just had a really fun discussion on some of the ramifications of, the different worldviews and stuff. But you also touched on Lewis's science fiction trilogy, which I'm now rereading, mainly so I can read That Hideous Strength, which I never had gotten to before, and just really enjoying it. And you actually answered a question that we had thought about, is if you would consider that a secondary world.
Yeah, That Hideous Strength, or the
I was thinking,
the...
I was thinking Perelandra and the planets, because
sure.
that's where I'm at right now.
Well, yes, in the sense that as far as we know scientifically, there isn't that kind of life on Mars or Venus. And so what if there were inhabitants? What if God created a different kind of inhabitant for each of those planets? What if each planet was a world of its own? And in that sense, yes, you do. the world of speculative fiction deals with preternaturals, or if it's science fiction, I mean, basically by definition, it's something that is possible, could happen, but hasn't happened or doesn't happen. And, science fiction certainly has evolved, but science fiction tends to present some kind of scientific explanation. But even in Lewis's trilogy, there's a scientific explanation in the sense that we have these two scientists who kidnap Ransom and take him up to Mars. And on Mars, we discover life.
Mm-hmm. Well, one more question about the space trilogy, and then I'll let Nick go on to something else. Another thing I remarked to him earlier today was that it's interesting that we don't have as many people. I mean, there's some people who try to emulate Narnia or Middle Earth, but not as many followers or imitators of the space trilogy, or really Christian science fiction for that matter. Why do you think that might be? It seems kind of neglected in Christian speculative fiction?
I think because science fiction, what was science fiction? Well, for example, let's go back to Faerie-land or the Out of the Silent Planet. We now know, scientific fact, that couldn't happen.
True.
And so I think with the advances in science, especially space travel, because a lot of science fiction has been space travel like, and we now know that that's not very plausible. So the idea, or at least the way Lewis presented his speculative fiction, wouldn't be very palpable. To go with a Star Trek, a Star Wars, the idea that that's way off in the future, and space travel is just taken for granted, and we know how it would happen, and we have things like time warps, and we can jump light speed. I think Christians probably don't find that a very tenable field, and I'm not quite sure why. I think most Christians are a little more comfortable with things that might be a secondary world that might parallel our primary world. It's something that took place in the historical past. We go back to a place like Redwall, for example, and that seems a little more comfortable to them. They're not as comfortable creating other beings that are not human. And that might have to do with their theology and the idea that, God created man in his own image, and as far as we know, he didn't create other beings.
Yeah.
So I think it might have something to do with that, but I don't think I've got a really good answer. That's just kind of off the top of my head.
Makes sense.
Actually, that leads into a question I was going to ask. When creating the world, obviously Christians have a certain theology of things certain things they'll play with and certain things they won't play with in the world. And a couple episodes ago, we were talking about God in fiction, and I know that oftentimes trying to figure out how to put God into these fantasy worlds is a thing that I see show up, at least in the stories I read from the classes. Do you guys talk about options for that in the classroom, or does everyone just come at it from their own angle?
Most of the students come at it from their own angle. We do talk about it. And, my argument is that you can convey truth without mentioning God. You can have Christian themes and ideology without using the name God or Jesus or Lord or Christ. And a prime example would be Lewis's Lord of the Rings. That's very Christian in terms of the ideology and the value system, and it's a kind of theistic worldview in that particular piece of fiction. I think we struggle with what do we call Christian fiction and how is that defined? And I don't think there's one single good definition, and I think you'll find arguments from all kinds of folks about what is and what isn't.
Yeah, we've had some of those here on the podcast.
That's true.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a gospel or a piece of evangelism. It can be what we know is true. It can be a piece of fiction that purports Christian values and right values and right choices and things that would be God-honoring in terms of behavior.
Now, I might know what you're going to say now, having heard that, but does the issue of magic come up then in context of the class?
Well, we talk about magic. One of the rules for creating a sustainable secondary world, a viable secondary world, is to establish the rules of magic. How is magic going to operate in this world? What does it cost? Card deals with that. He has a whole segment in his second chapter on, what is the cost of magic? And I think, again, we're talking about terms. Magic in itself is a pretty neutral term, and it's not Christian or non-Christian. Magic can be defined as something that doesn't have an scientific explanation, and that in itself is not Christian or non-Christian. If you look at the Chronicles of Narnia, there's a good magic and a bad magic, and actually the word magic is associated with the acts of Aslan and the emperor over the sea, beyond the sea, who is the creator. And so there's nothing sacrilegious about that in my mind. It's a way for others to take hold of Christian truth and Christian ideology. The Christianity in the the Chronicles of Narnia is pretty overt. And if you can't see the parallels, biblical parallels, then you haven't read the Bible. But notice that Aslan talks about a deeper magic. He's talking about grace. He's talking about redemption. Mm-hmm. So I don't get too stuck on the term magic. But if you're going to use magic, then you have to decide how it's going to operate. And it probably has some limitations. There are things that magic can and can't do. You don't want to just explain things away and, suddenly somebody has the power to fix this problem if you haven't already established that. Mm. So you certainly just want to be consistent.
No, I agree with that. I was just curious to hear your explanation. When you have your students build the world, because it's important to know the world well before you can put a plot on it. Mm-hmm. And I have various writing friends who do their world building completely different from each other. I mean, I'm curious. Do you find that once you build the world that people get lost in minutia and then have trouble getting the big story, theme, character going, or does it come pretty naturally to the students once they get the? I guess what I'm saying is you build in the world, and sometimes I know people get lost in the world, and then exactly, and then it's hard to get a coherent plot out of it. And does that? I mean,
no, I don't. I haven't really found that, but remember, I'm working with a group of pretty elite students. I mean, they've already written and published.
Yeah.
They managed a fiction writing class successfully. And they have some experience, so it's not just somebody trying her hand at fantasy, or I feel like writing a piece of speculative fiction. So they can't get down to business, and the artificial environment of being in a course and having to complete things by the end of a semester in a 14-week period, that kind of is a motivator or a push.
Deadlines are good
in itself. But I make them spend time with their secondary world, thinking it through. And most of them so far have had a plot idea before they've had a world idea.
Okay.
And so I kind of make them take a step back and think about, okay, it sounds like a good story, but where does it happen? And what kind of a world is this? Who populates it? That will help you explain character motivation. And of course, you've got to have that, or you really don't have much of a plot.
Yeah. And I have to say, all the ones I've read, I've really enjoyed. It's quite a cushy job.
It's been quite an array, and everything has been unique and different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's always the surprising first chapters I get which directions they're going, and some of them get very. You can tell they've planned a very large history for their world, and other people, just have a nice environment. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let me pose a similar question to what Nick said, but with a little different spin on it. I read in a book by Kevin Murphy of Mystery Science Theater 3000 fame. He was writing about some of his theater going experiences, and he wrote about when he went to see the premiere of The Fellowship of the Ring in theater, and how he was standing in line behind these fanboys who were kind of debating about how Gandalf got the sword and who was really at the river outside of Rivendell and stuff like that. And the authors got to thinking about how he used to kind of obsess over the same sort of details when he used to read the books in college. And then after a certain point, he got his fill of it and decided to go on to other kinds of movies and stories that he felt had more real human action rather than kind of handling on these minutiae. So I guess that kind of made me to wonder in terms of, from a audience perspective, escapism is too much? How much do we get caught up in this world and not have how do we maintain the balance between actually, having this world mean something in God's real world, if that makes any sense?
I think, let me attempt to kind of rephrase that.
Sure, yeah.
I'm answering what you're asking. Let me take a step back and say that we know that Tolkien was interested in minutia because of all of his notebooks and all of the backstory that he created, that he spent so much time editing The Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. But he didn't lose sight of his story or his plot or his characters. And if you were only reading The Lord of the Rings, then you wouldn't have that same impression of the idea of the too much detail, too much history, too many names, too many places, too many stories. But it's because we have all of that we know that he, had a difficult time letting go and finally getting the thing to press. He kept wanting to tinker with it. So having said that, I think what you're asking is it possible for someone to get so caught up in just experiencing these secondary worlds that he or she can kind of lose sight of why she was reading in the first place, or what value the story might have?
Mm-hmm. Or just kind of I know, like, when I was in high school, I had to take a step back out of Star Wars for a bit because it just got too wrapped up. It was consuming too many of my thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what I'm wondering.
Sure. Actually, Tolkien talks about the good escape, which he uses a term for called eucatastrophe. And there are two things that happen. First of all, as a reader and a professor of literature for many years, I believe in the value of story and the richness that literature brings to our lives. And I think that anytime we enter into a piece of well-written fiction, that can be a life-giving experience for us and a good escape. But the point that Tolkien comes down on is that what makes it a good escape is that it brings us back to the real world, or the primary world, with fresh eyes, with a new perspective, with a better understanding of ourselves and the world around us. I think an example that might be meaningful to the audience here is the idea of reading The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings and meeting the Ents and thinking about a tree as having life and a personality. So that when I'm taking a walk in the woods the next time and I look at the trees, my imagination is awake. And I look at those trees differently now because I encountered a fictional tree, if you will, in Tolkien's story. So I've come back to this primary world enriched and enlightened. And the value of good literature is that it makes us more human. It makes us better people. We have more to offer others. We place the right kind of value on things if we're reading things that are worth reading.
Mm-hmm.
Like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It reminds me of some Chesterton story I read where there was just some line about, like how a good story will help the real world seem more full of wonder, whereas a false story will just make you not interested in the world at all.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess one last kind of a bonus question. What secondary world would you like to spend time in that's not written by Tolkien or Lewis?
Well, I have to say that something like a Star Wars secondary world would frighten me a little too much. I don't think I want to go there.
Understandable.
Yes.
So I probably, and even I think the world of Avatar is just gorgeous, stunningly beautiful. But that's a little scary for me too. I don't want to be in Jurassic Park either. So let me find some more pleasant place I can live. Where let's see.
Wind in the Willows. There we go.
Yeah, might those animals talking might, I don't know.
That's true.
Maybe I just want to go with Beatrix Potter. Maybe I want to go to the 100-Acre Wood. And
there you go. That'd be a nice place.
I want to go there.
Yeah.
I want to go to Winnie the Pooh's 100-Acre Wood.
That'd be a relaxing place to go. I like that.
Yes.
That's hard to argue with. Anything really, most Disney-related worlds,
Yeah.
All
All
right.
right. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciated your time and your insight.
Yeah, and any summary words, like special plugs for Taylor you want to throw in here?
Well, are we recruiting students?
Sure.
Well, you can study writing here, and you really do it. We're not just talking about it, we do it. But seriously, for those who are interested in Tolkien and Lewis and Charles Williams and Chesterton, some names that we've mentioned tonight, if we're going to talk about fantasy, we have to talk about George MacDonald.
Mhm.
We do have a special
MacDonald,
collection on those authors here called the Brown Collection, and it's open every afternoon. So welcome to come to Taylor and visit. You can find out about it on the Taylor website. You do need to go to if you type in the search to find it, just type in C.S. Lewis and you'll get to information in our website about the center. And we welcome guests all the time. Some fun stuff to look at, including manuscripts and first editions and letters. So we're very happy to share that.
It is a very cool collection.
It is a very nice collection.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still have that like bar piece that was Lewis's, I think?
Yes, we have a pub, yes. Or pub furniture.
Nice.
Nice.
Is that from the...
The Inklings, I think?
No, the collector, who Dr. Brown, for whom the collection is named, had started this collection of first editions of Lewis's work, and he found pieces of pub furniture, the bar,
Okay.
the main piece, and had it in his basement where he had the copies of the first editions. So when he sold the collection, well, at least the initial parts of the collection to us, he decided that the furniture needed to come with. So that's why we have a pub at Taylor.
Nice.
Nice.
Where it's against the LTC to actually drink.
Right. Yeah, it's the sign above it says free beer tomorrow and tomorrow never comes.
Classic. All right.
All right. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Well, thanks, guys. It was fun to talk to you.
All right.
We're back.
We're back.
Here in Rivendell, in the land of singing elves and falling leaves.
So
and-
actually, I just got done wiping my eyes. They told me the story of Turnbaum. Oh, it's so sad.
Oh, I must have tuned out through that. I was too busy listening to the interview, which was really nice.
It was really nice and probably more entertaining than more uplifting. Yeah, and I know Tim and I thought that the interview was nice because it was like, hey, we know what we're talking about.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, this very experienced professor just like validated everything that we've been saying.
So if you think we're wrong, we're not.
And if not, you can take it up with the elves. They'll have a word with you.
That's sure they will. We'll go ahead and go with our first soundtrack.
Our soundtrack intro almost sounds like some of the Elvish music here. I don't know if you noticed that. Or if not the Elvish music, some of the human music. That's details. Anywho, I guess I've got the first soundtrack today. And I decided to go with a song, back when we did our brainstorming section, we talked about how music can help us come up with things. That was sort of dates back to a writing exercise from your writing group.
I made a very interesting CD with songs that I think actually a number of people came with ideas from.
Yes. Well, and after you left that writing group, which coincidentally, and I think we've mentioned before, was also called Derailed Trains of Thought.
No relation. Okay.
Sort of.
All the relation.
Just stealing names,
yeah,
basically.
clones, actually.
But after when our friend Aaron Brosman took leadership of that, he also did the same sort of exercise and made his own CD.
See, he likes music as much as I do in the creative process.
Yeah. And that's where I first heard my choice for soundtrack this time. It's from that Story Song CD from 2003. The name of the remix is Crying Mountain, and it's from Chrono Trigger.
In case you don't know, Chrono Trigger has fabulous music.
Yes, which had thought that we'd use it all the time. Then I realized, no, actually, it's been quite a while since we had a Chrono Trigger soundtrack. I mean, until you used it
episode.
last episode, right? But yeah, fabulous soundtrack. And I've always meant I'd always love to write or read a story based on this song, because it always makes me think of like some place, not unlike where we're at now, some epic faraway kingdom that is in the middle of a vast battle to maintain its existence. Actually, your story, King's Shield, would be sort of in the same sort of spirit I would see this story based on this song. So, hope you enjoy. It's a beautiful song, remixed by Psycho, much more pronounceable name than his real name, so I won't even attempt it. But this is Crying Mountain. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that. Go battle down the hatches and stuff like that. That sounds like a parody thing. That's not what I meant, but go be chivalrous and stuff. That's what it makes me think of.
That's good. All right, we will then go to a very special what if. We decided today, since we were talking about world building and creating a secondary world that's logically consistent, internally consistent, that we'd kind of exchange what if questions about creating a world. Because a lot of worlds come from asking what if, as Dr. Jordan mentioned.
Yeah, which I thought was really cool. That she actually said that, and we had no idea that was, that's the name of our segment.
Yeah, I mean, no one names segments what if.
Okay. We're
so,
really goofy today.
So I'm wired this evening. I don't know what's up.
I'm
no longer teaching, and I have a lot of free time. Well, I don't actually have that much free time, but I have a lot more brain time.
Well, that's obvious, because you keep sending me sending all kinds of ideas about our various projects, and I think you posted more ideas in the last 2 weeks than they had in the past month.
It's probably true. Yeah, having time frees my mind up. My mind works very quickly. But anyways. So, what if? So, we'll start with questions. Tim, shall I start with?
Go for it.
Okay, so I've had this long-standing idea that I've used in various short stories. I'll ask you, how would you create a world, or what sort of world would it be if you could live inside a cloud? Like it was more. I mean, it was still cloudy, but it was it could support your weight. You could carve rooms out of it.
Oh, interesting. So you're not thinking like Care Bears here,
No, I'm thinking like you could make rooms out of it. You could. I mean, obviously you couldn't necessarily control them.
So that's interesting. That's an interesting one, because you're talking about something that is normally something that has no substance, basically.
Yeah.
So are you thinking shapes? I'm
thinking like actual, like there's in the sky, and you can just. Well, so I had this idea.
Like obviously you have a vision for me.
Well, not necessarily. I'm not curious. A long time ago, I was driving. Well, here's how it came about. We were at Honda Homecoming, which is this big event for Honda, and I was driving. We were going back and forth from our hotel, and I was in the back of the truck, sitting in the bed of the truck, and looking up at the sky and watching the clouds. And I was thinking, what if you could live in one of those clouds? And then I had this idea of a story, which I never end up writing, though think I wrote a couple pages of it, where this family was like destitute, and they were going to get kicked out of their home, and then this cloud fell down on the ground, and they lived in it.
Interesting.
And then things like that have shown up in various pieces of my other works. Lunatic Pandora has clouds falling down. There's a cloud motif in Local Man Struck by Lightning Survives that are left over from this very powerful image I had in my head. So I'm just curious what you would do with it.
I wonder if like there'd be different areas, like the darker the area of a cloud, the denser it is, so the more it would support your weight.
Okay.
Whereas like lighter portions, you might actually like slip, like you might be in danger of slipping through if you didn't walk carefully enough. I don't know if.
Would you do a story with like just one? It's a unique thing, like just one person has found out how to do it, or that it was like something like the rich and famous do.
I don't think I'd do a rich and famous sort of thing. I'd either do an unique individual sort of thing. Like it'd be kind of cool to see a Johnny Appleseed sort of, mythic tall tale sort of figure who's able to do this.
That'd be a great tall tale.
That would be. Or the complete flip side where it's a whole civilization, which could be interesting. But then
like Scorched Earth, so they all live in the clouds.
Yeah, something like that.
Dystopian.
Although it'd be, well... Okay.
Very happy to... A chipper dystopian.
Where it's always sunny.
It's always sunny.
Although, see, that's the interesting thing. I wonder if it was a civilization, I suppose then maybe it would be very telling, like the more well-to-do, higher society is up, closer to the sun, and lower society is in, like, down the depths down where all the rainwater is kept and so forth.
Okay, yeah.
So... I don't know. That could be
a very nomadic society.
It could be. Yeah, it could very well be.
Go on the airstreams back and forth.
See, the tricky thing is, I would suppose if it's a civilization, they would have some way of controlling the clouds. So
that's true.
So then I'm like, well, how do you do that without it seeming too much like air bending or water bending?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
From like Avatar land.
Well, I suppose you just hope maybe they took cover there, and then they're just kind of blown. Yeah, I could see a theme of that being blown by the winds, that you're just at the mercy of.
Oh, that's interesting. So so maybe if you're
like
being
stranded
blown
on an island, but everyone's stranded on an island.
But I would imagine if they're blown by the winds a lot, then they don't really have much control over. They probably can't make shapes out of their houses and cloud houses.
Well, I guess you could make shapes. I guess you could make sails, but I suppose. Oh, okay. Well, maybe clouds are always shifting. Maybe you could make a shape, but over days they would slowly.
Oh, transform and take different... Okay, so
you're constantly working it into some semblance of a... And I guess it's almost like being on a... You could run it almost like being on a deserted island, except you're floating around and you're meeting other islands.
I was just going to say, it's still thinking Faerie-land, of course.
Yeah.
It's sort of like Lewis's floating islands, where like the landscape kind of takes the shape of the waves that it's on top of. So... the clouds kind of,
there could be something there.
That's a very interesting idea, actually.
Or a world where, like, maybe there is no land.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so like water world, except in the sky.
I guess so.
Oh, that could be interesting too. If it's like on a gas giant.
Okay,
like if you could inhabit Jupiter or something, which is all gas.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can make it sci-fi that way.
That's true. That way it would be sci-fi. That's an interesting perspective on it. Because I don't think, aside from Cloud City, I don't know that there's been too many stories about colonies on gas giants.
That's true.
That's interesting. All right, well, that's our first question. Now, are you expecting me to come up with another what-if question, or did you have, like, several?
Oh, I have one. I have another one that's very not well-defined.
Oh, go for it.
Okay. So I'm always fascinated with this idea of connections, of, like, people being connected in some way. And I was just very vaguely wondering... when I was trying to think of what ifs. But connection, and I'm not sure exactly what I mean by it yet. But say you were born, and then everyone has someone they're connected to, like emotionally or not physically, obviously. Mm-hmm. But like they can sense them, and they can. But maybe it's just random people across the world. I mean, what would that? Like, I'm born here, and mine. I don't know how I find. Whether you can tell their proximity or not. I don't know, or maybe you just feel what they're feeling. So. It's very vague, but then do some people then choose to go find them? Do someone find their love that way? Do some find, like, worse enemies? I mean, do someone just try to ignore it?
Oh, interesting. So random empathetic connection.
Yeah.
Huh.
The randomness adds a whole new
element
to
yeah.
it. You know, then you have a choice about what you're going to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Whether you're going to relate to this person or whatnot.
Yeah, at least empathetic. I don't know if there's something more. Probably not. Probably mainly empathetic. So I don't know what you could do with that, but it's just a what if idea that I haven't fleshed out and I thought I'd bring to the table.
Huh. It reminds me in some ways of Rising Stars, the J. Michael Straczynski comic.
Mm-hmm.
That one, just a certain number of... Well, no, it's a town.
It's all one town.
All one town that they get superpowers. And then if one of them dies and the rest of them get that person's power.
Oh, yeah, it is something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, that's a loose sort of... That's just the only reason why it made me think of it, because, you know, the people of these towns, they kind of...
Think about that. What if you're connected to someone, they, like, die early in age? Do you have this sense of loss all their...
Oh, that's interesting. Well, although it also made me wonder, you know, what if you, like, if you had this connection to this absolutely psycho person, that might be, like... You might have a story of someone who's really tempted to go get rid of that person. So they don't have this other thing to bother with.
It'd be an interesting way to analyze, you know, what is our responsibility for each other.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because there's that, you know, who wrote that poem, "For whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee." Like,
is that John Donne?
It might be John Donne. People know it more because of Hemingway now, but you know, the poet, whoever wrote it. But that same idea that all mankind is connected somehow, and you lose one person, you lose all. That would be an interesting way to explore that. Because, I mean, really, we don't normally feel much connection to people who live, well, sometimes, you know, a few blocks from us, let alone all the way around the world.
Well, and fantasy is often done, during Wheel Time, they have this bond between, the Aes Sedai, the magicians, can bond warriors, and they will share emotions, they can tell where people are, and then, you know, strengthen each other. Or, like in Twilight Dawn of mine, the Rankar, like Otaka, they're kind of born in twins. They're born in pairs, and kind of connections, and then he lost his...
And that's why he's in exile.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
But I don't know that I've ever seen this randomness aspect to it, which adds up, you know, because normally it's a choice,
right?
Or possibly some sort of a family,
a blood relation
thing.
Yeah, that is interesting.
I mean, the world would be vastly different, and there'd be a lot. I mean, it would almost bring all kinds of civic and spiritual questions to the forefront of your life, unless you just learn to ignore it, I suppose.
Yeah, especially since it's not like, if it's always random, it's not like you're gonna have a generational or racial thing. Like, there's always a possibility that, like, you're not guaranteed of getting this empathetic connection with someone from your own race, even. Mm-hmm. It could be someone from across the world entirely.
Okay, so you're Civil War, and you're a Southern slave owner, and you're connected to some slave.
Yeah, well, possibly.
You know.
Yeah. Or I'm
thinking that because I just because I've been reading the not that we're talking about books we're reading, but reading Midnight Rising, which is historical nonfiction about Dan Brown, who did the Harper's Ferry raid. So I'm in kind of this Civil War mindset right now.
Okay, yeah. But I mean, it could be in something like that, or it could be like, you know, say you're the son of this racist, and then you have a connection to this other person. So then you've got not just a, you know, personal, and it becomes, you know, against what. No,
I assume the one thing that would be in common, we'd be about the same age. As I would assume I guess, when does the bond start? Does it start at birth? Because if so, then you'd have to be born around the same time.
That's a good question.
Or does it just come randomly?
Another random...
Like, maybe you could live 30 years without a connection.
Without ever feeling it, and then all of a sudden you have one?
Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting. And I wonder what sort of societal ramifications it would have. I mean, maybe you wouldn't have civil wars as often because there'd be more people who are more empathetic with people who come from a vastly different way of life.
Or could it work backfire, and then, you know, it's like sometimes the thing that you most talk against is the thing that you do yourself. Maybe, you know, you don't like this empathy, you know, almost like a backlash. Mm-hmm. And for some people, I think there'd probably be less wars because of it. But
right, yeah, for some people, they'd be like, I hate this person because I keep feeling
hate anything like that. And
yeah, because you hear too much of it. That's interesting. Wow. Yeah. I'd be interested to see if...
It'd be an interesting collection of short stories.
It would be. So, yeah, people should definitely be taking notes while they're listening to us.
If you're interested in doing a short story collection with me sometime on that, contact me in about a year.
In about a year.
I got another project first.
Or two.
That also has connections. See, right. I told you it keeps coming up.
Yeah. All right. So, you said you had a third one.
Did I have a third ridiculous? Oh, not really. It was just, no, it's not big enough of one.
Okay.
Do you have one?
So Well, I hadn't even really thought of... let me see if I can come up with something real quick.
Well, okay, I'll just say this because this is a story. This is for back on. Have I talked about the blue van on this podcast before?
I don't think so.
Okay,
Wait, no, yeah, I think
the
so.
Auburn van I
little
used to
bit.
take to school.
Okay.
Well, Randolph Johnson and I used to make up ridiculous stories. And one of the things that came up, we were learning about all the wonderful properties of water in freshman biology.
Uh-huh.
We spent like 2 weeks learning about the properties of water and why it's so awesome.
Mm.
And one of the properties that it's, because of its molecular format, when it's solid, it's actually less dense than the liquid, which is odd. So ice cubes float.
Mm-hmm.
And so like ice in a lake stays at the top of the lake.
Right.
And then we're like, well, what was it? What if it, and nothing else does that, or very few elements do that.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought, well, what if it worked like all the other elements? And then, the ice would sink. And then we thought, well, then fish would die in the winter.
Okay, yeah.
And so we thought, okay, I think it's freshman year. So we decide that the fish would evolutionarily have to come up with some way to not die when it froze.
Okay.
So that they would become rocket fish. So that they would migrate every year you stand out and watch them. And like in the fall, there's this mass aerial migration of fish shooting out of the lake going south.
That's kind of awesome. Actually. I can totally see that happening in a Doctor Who world somewhere.
I've once tried to write I started a short story. It's not enough of a plot. It's just more of a scene.
Uh-huh.
I guess I could write a poem or something.
That'd be kind of interesting.
But, I mean, it's more than a picture because you have to explain it. But I haven't quite found the right... It's more of a vignette. I guess you could you could almost do a flash fiction of it.
Almost,
Maybe,
yeah.
Almost. If you found some character do... some kid, it's his first fish migration he's ever watched.
I was gonna say like an intergalactic tourist trap. Like people come from all over the galaxy to see this phenomenon that only happens on this planet.
I like that. We could do that. That would be fun. And some people, it's a good way to catch fish.
That's true.
Set up your nets.
See how many. Well, then it could become a contest. There's your conflict right there.
There's a conflict.
See if your main character wins this thing.
Oh man, I have to write that. I don't write me in flash fiction lately, but I have other stuff I'm writing. But I've actually been missing my flash fictions.
I was having a lot. Yeah.
I really enjoyed them, but it's a different mindset from what longer stuff I'm writing right now.
Yeah.
You gotta take a complete break and remove and.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do a month of flash fictions one of these days.
That's a fun. I'm glad you mentioned that.
That's how. If you read my what's it called? School's Out flash fiction. Okay. That came from the Blue Van too, and we were just talking about what if we're driving back and forth on I-69.
Uh-huh.
What if the roads were conveyor belts, and then we made a
Right.
transcontinental conveyor belt, and then we said you could have houses on it. And
Nice.
Is that all built? And then I wrote that into School's Out. So if you want to go to my website and look under flash fictions, read School's Out. That's what that came up with.
Nice promo.
Yeah. Hey, thank you.
I'm kind of drawing a blank in terms of coming up with a what if on the spot.
That's fine. Those were the three I thought of. So
those, I really like that last one. I kind of do want to see a flash fiction of that.
Okay, I'll have to do that. Hey, I did the asteroid one from our last brainstorm.
That's true.
Which was actually one of my favorites, humor wise.
It was hilarious.
Right.
All right. Well, I came up with the what if question last time, so
yeah, that's true.
I'm gonna say I'm covered.
Well, Tim, if you think of it, Tim and I are thinking about starting more bloggy sort of stuff on our website.
Yes.
So you think of it, throw it up as a little
We'll throw it up
thing.
in the blog. Yeah. Because we realized, we had talked about for a while coming up with like sidetracks for like, if we had to add one more thing, which is sort of what we did with the 20th episode. But even then we forgot stuff.
Yes, we did.
But Nick came up with this idea to maybe include some actual, just some posts on our blog.
Little thoughts and tidbits and afterthoughts. And
since it is a blog, technically.
Yeah. So you can have more Derailed in the Thought in your month.
Yes, since the podcast will probably still remain monthly for the foreseeable future. So, all right. Cool.
All right. I guess we'll sign out
with
the soundtrack
and
contact info. I'm like, what is it called?
What do we usually do at the end of the episode?
Are you thinking what I'm thinking, Brain?
Well, possibly. But I don't know how they fit in those skirts.
But they call them sad meals. I don't think anyone would buy them. I don't think they have rubber underwear our size, Perry.
You're actually coming up with quotes. I just made that up.
Oh, no, those were ones that were, yeah.
Yeah, I figured those were real
No,
quotes.
yeah, I think those are real ones. Okay, anyways, time for contact info.
We're talking about our blog, and if you've forgotten where that is, it is derailedtrainsofthought.blogspot.com.
Subscribe to us on iTunes or email us at derailedtrains@gmail.com.
So those are some very simple ways to keep in touch. And again, we're still saying that there is something bigger coming up that is not ready yet.
It's getting closer. I mean, it's progress is being made.
Yes.
It's a very exciting passive sentence there. Progress is being made.
More definitive than if this was a film sort of project, we'd say that we're past most of the pre-production and we're into the production.
That's true.
phase.
I guess we can say, since this is our world building episode, there's a good chunk. We've been doing a lot of world building.
This is true.
Substantial amounts of world building.
Just when we thought we were done,
In
we
committee,
realized there was
yeah.
more world building.
Committee world building is not the easiest thing to do.
No.
It comes up with a lot of neat stuff, but it's
Yeah. Well, the difference is between 1 and 2 people, like what we're doing, just throwing stuff out, and then like doing a slightly larger group
Yeah.
with lots of people throwing ideas out.
But if you like original fiction, there may be something for you in the next 6 months. I don't know. We don't have a timeline yet.
At one point, I think we said end of summer. Hopefully, maybe.
Maybe mid-fall.
We might have a more official. Might be able to put out a more official announcement by end of summer.
That's true. We'll have something. We might just have a promo.
That's possible.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Anyway, we're done
yes.
talking about stuff that you don't
So,
understand.
I'll go with my soundtrack before we sign out here. I am doing, since we were doing world building, I thought we'd go do one of the famous video games, which would be SimCity 2000, where you build a city. This is remixed by Dr. Velvet and Halo Zero. Wow. And it is called Sim Funkadelic, and it's quite funky.
Yeah, I think it's funny too for being from SimCity 2000. I think it has a certain 90s vibe to it. Like you can almost see some talk shows opening with this or something.
Nice. So I think you'll enjoy it. I think I've been bringing a lot of funky music in the last couple episodes, but
Nothing
hey,
wrong with that.
it's always good.
Yeah.
So that's all we've got. We're going to sit here and enjoy some more stories, and we'll see you later.
Yeah. I'm gonna hear this story about these 2 kids, Baron and Luthien. I hear it's pretty exciting.
I hear there's a better, a pretty good one.
So, cool.
Okay. This has been Nick.
And this is Tim.
Adios.
Bye-bye.
All your Silmarils belong to us.
You better not let the elves hear you say that.